the Dream 100 Show. The epicenter of influence, collaboration, and exponential growth. You're about to discover the power of relationships. Dream 100 relationships. And you're one relationship away from a totally different business and life. This is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Dream 100 Show. Last week, I decided to kick off a project where I'm going to be documenting every couple of weeks progress of me showing you how I'm deploying the Dream 100 to grow the Dream 100 company. I'm also further going to document how we're leveraging the Dream 100 to grow some of my marketing agencies at the same time. And rather than just continuing to kind of talk in theory, and this is how you deploy the Dream 100, I thought it would be a lot more impactful to be showing you things, but more so talking through the thinking, talking through the strategy, talking through where I get stuck or where I pause, so that you can kind of reflect a little bit as you start to do the exact same things within your business. So there's one thing that I have always believed to be true, and that is that the right book, training, course, content, coach, mentor, speaker, course can completely change the trajectory of your life, your thinking, your marriage, your business, whatever that area that you're looking to transform. And what's interesting is that over the last week and a half, as I started to embark on the Dream 100 for the Dream 100, I really got into some deep thinking on what's the strategy that I want to see for growth. And there's a book that came to kind of the top of my mind. I haven't read it, and I decided to buy the Audible version, the audio, and it's called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And for some reason, as I was putting kind of names down for the Dream 100. Okay, and there were some people like Ryan Deiss of Digital Marketer, Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels, Billy Jean of Billy Jean is Marketing. And I'm going to talk this whole thing through with you. I started looking at, well, what could they refer? So as you know, a Dream 100 joint venture, Dream 100 partner, affiliate, whatever word you'd like to use, has to have the ability to refer a lot of business. So if I look at a Russell Brunson, for example, and they have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of users, that could be a mega relationship. But what ended up happening was I really started getting into my head of what's the actual strategy that I want to deploy within the company to grow. So what I want you to do is, before you start making that list of who's the Dream 100, I'm going to throw a challenge to you today that I literally have thrown to myself this week. And that is to look at how could I obtain a 10x growth trajectory rather than a 2x. And what's interesting is that when I really started thinking about it, I realized that everything that I thought I had to do was basically thrown out the window. So let me talk it through with you live. So let's just say I'm going to pick a number that we did $1 million in revenue this year. And if I were to say, great, I want to double our revenue next year. And that would mean adding more done for you Dream 100 clients. That would mean adding hundreds and hundreds of more people to the Dream 100 software and doing some speaking, consulting, book sales, course sales. And we most likely could hit that number with a couple of the really great strategic partners that could help really catapult things. And I looked at that and said, like, that would be ridiculously exciting, would be very, very good. And I was happy with it. But what's interesting, as I finished going through the audio version of 10x is easier than 2x, I started thinking a lot bigger. And I started challenging myself and our team to say, well, what could that actually look like? What would have to change about me? What would have to change about my mindset? What would have to change about our service offerings? And I realized that while it's exciting to go from 1 million to 2 million, for example, and most people would be very, very happy with that. I would be very, very happy with that. What if we could start to put things in place to actually have a 10x future? Now, that doesn't mean that it needs to be 10x over 1 year. Doesn't need to be 10x over 2 years. But the whole premise of this 10x concept by Dan Sullivan is really around what has to change about what you're doing today to start to make way for that. And one of the exercises that he has, it's called the biggest check. And you can look at like what are some of the biggest checks you've gotten. So like if you've done consulting or speaking or some of your biggest clients or biggest orders, what have those biggest orders been? And then you start to think about, well, what if that was a 10x size check? So for example, at the Dream 100, our Done For You program, it ranges in terms of the investment, but with the podcast and everything else, it's roughly $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month. So our Done For You Dream 100 program has an investment that varies, but the average investment is right around $5,000 a month, $60,000 for the year. And we're historically able to produce really great results within 12 months. So if I were to say, okay, great, with the Dream 100, the biggest check would be a $60,000 check. Maybe it was $100,000 because it was a little bit more complex. And then I took that and I said, well, what if that check wasn't 60,000 or even 100,000? What if that check was $1 million? And what's interesting is that exercise started to have me really reframe who I now see as a slam dunk strategic partner for the Dream 100. And that led me down the path of looking at how could we start to work with bigger corporations, businesses that have much more disposable income rather than someone that, let's say they're doing $1 million or $2 million a year and they can write that modest, that good check. But there's only so many people that could write $1 million check. And that's when you start to get into, private businesses that are doing, let's say, $100 million a year. You get into the Fortune 1000, for example, Fortune 500, and bigger companies. So when I started going down that rabbit hole, it led me to the path of looking at partnering with speakers, authors, coaches, and consultants that are already working with this demographic. So when you're looking at that, who's that particular partner, you want to make sure that they already have relationships with the people that you're trying to go after. So what I realized in looking at the plan for next year and the next couple of years, while we want to see a nice growth trajectory, I was really thinking smaller than I should have been. And that thinking smaller was causing me to only focus on a certain kind of demographic. When I started really looking at it and saying, well, geez, if you got $1 million check, you just doubled in size from one check. And the goal is to obviously have multiple of those checks. Now, the other thing with this that I really like is with where the economy is, smaller businesses are going to have a very tough time over the next 1, 2, 3 years. It's going to continue to be challenging. And those are the businesses that, even though they should be investing more and more and more in marketing, and especially investing in deploying things like the Dream 100, business owners are not rational people. They're going to look at their P&L statement. Oh my gosh, I'm spending 10, 15% on marketing. Let's slash that to 5% and try and weather the storm. When they should be doing the opposite, because as people are scaling back, it's a great time for you to grab market share. Whoever can afford to invest the most money to obtain a customer will always win. Phrase by Dan Kennedy. So I thought that that was the audience that I wanted, those businesses doing like $1 to $3 million. But in reality, I realized that I'm going to need to make some changes over the next 12 months to be able to bring in that higher level client that could write a $250,000, $500,000, $1 million check. So we really started then doing the research using a variety of tools. I actually just Googled, in simplicity, people give me names of people that work with the Fortune 1000. And I started looking at all these different names. So I'm going to pull some of these up and just give you a couple of them. So, Marshall Goldsmith, for example. Angela Duckworth, she does a lot of really cool stuff around grit and perseverance. John Maxwell, Patrick Lencioni, Adam Grant, Stephen Covey, Amy Cuddy, Tony Robbins, Daniel Pink. So these people that already are working with really, really big organizations. So, well, Michael, how does that fit into the Dream 100 strategy of the done for you and the software? And the answer is right now it doesn't perfectly fit like a glove. But if I were to not challenge myself over the last week or so, I would have went down a path and said, well, great, we're getting the growth, but could we have had a different path that I just really would have had to have started thinking a bit more outside the box, not having limiting beliefs? And the answer would have been yes, like I would have went down that path. So what I'm going to strategically do is we're not just going to throw in the towel and say, great, we're only going to work with Fortune 1000 companies that can write a check of at least $500,000. That's the kiss of death in business, is you don't just completely change course. So what we're also going to do in tandem is we're going to start going after people like Ryan Deiss, Russell Brunson, Dan Kennedy, Justin Brook. So a lot of people that are in the digital marketing space and people that are working with serious business owners. So not people that are just working with people that want to do information marketing, but like a Ryan Deiss, a digital marketer, and I've paid them a lot of money over the years for a lot of their courses and training and such. They have different levels of people. So if I were to look at him, we'll just use that as an example. And say, well, what would be a slam dunk with Ryan Deiss? Well, it would be maybe co-creating a course together. It could be coming to his, I think it's called War Room, and having a seat at the table, essentially, to be able to train the War Room people on the Dream 100. And then he says, well, I'm endorsing Michael and their company. And then all of a sudden you've got 50 people that are now paying you $5,000 a month. And he just referred $100,000 a month and $1 million a year of revenue. So what we're going to do is we're going to have relationships like that, but we're also going to start to sprinkle in some of the people that I had rattled off. So we're going to look at Stephen Covey's organization, for example. We're going to look at Tony Robbins. And now my next step is we're going to start to leverage different software tools, which I'll talk through in the next episode. And I'm going to start to look at, great, who's the VP of partnerships, VP of marketing, CMO. We'll try and find Tony Robbins' personal contact information. That will not be easy, but we're going to start to build out that list. And the way that I'm going to rank the list is we're going to have like really, really hard to obtain people. A Tony Robbins, for example, would definitely be very, very high on that list. And when I'm saying very hard to obtain, it would be people that most likely are not going to be looking at their social media. So they're not typically going to be looking at their social media, whereas somebody like a Gary Vaynerchuk, who is on our Dream 100 list, is looking at and engaging with his social media on a regular basis. So we're going to kind of prioritize this list, and we're going to have roughly 50% of the names are going to be people that have the Fortune 1000 and bigger companies that they work with. And the other 50% are going to be, how can we continue to grow the done for you? But also, what if we were to have someone that could send 1,000 licenses of our software tool? That's still really great revenue, passive revenue, and that would still have a massive impact on our business. But what I'm starting to do now is starting to work with the team and say, great, what do we need to change to start to accommodate this 10x? What team members do we need? What frameworks? What types of proposals? Like, how do we have to change so that as we go through Q1, Q2, for example, that we start to appeal more to that audience? Now, the only challenge that I see, I mean, there's always lots and lots of challenges, but the biggest challenge that I see is how to have my social media be reflective of what we do, but have a message that's going to resonate with both types of audiences. And that one I candidly don't have figured out just yet. Because if I were to go and change my social media and say, we help the Fortune 1000 deploy the Dream 100. Okay, great. Well, what happens when we're still bringing in lots of people that want to work with us at the levels that we have been working, but then they read all of our social media and look at it and say, I'm a $2 million organization and your social media says you only work with Fortune 1000. So I'm going to have to look at what kind of languaging I can use. I might have to be a little bit more generalized, but that's definitely going to pose to be a challenge. Because the other thing that I've realized when I finished out this whole 10X concept was that some of the content that I'm doing is bringing in and speaking to the wrong audience. So if I'm putting out content saying, here are the 10 ways that you can save your business. Here are the 5 things you need to do to get out of the red zone and actually get into the green. I was looking at that saying, well, yeah, it was really helpful content, but then we were attracting the wrong audience. So we're going to have to do some cleanup on a lot of the content we're doing, a lot of my social media before I start to send out any kind of messages. But I wanted to give you that update, and I wanted to challenge you for today to I would highly suggest you listening to the book 10X is Easier Than 2X. And then B, I want to challenge you to look at who are some of those people that could write you a check that is 10 times the size of whatever you've gotten. And then I want you to look at that and say, how could you start to work some of those people into your Dream 100? That's what I've got for you today. I appreciate you being alongside for this journey. I'm going to continue to be raw and just share what I'm looking at, how we're approaching it, what we're doing, and start to share the results as we start outreach. We start to grab all their contact details. We start to send gifts and all of that fun stuff with you live. Catch up with you soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. See ya.